Mahalo, David. Thank you. We'll begin this morning with our affirmation. Just kidding. I held a small piece of parchment in my hands, and I wondered about its origin. I worked as the Unity archivist, and there was a piece of parchment in the Unity archives at Unity Village, Missouri, with this on it. On a hunch that it might be Arabic, I called Dr. Ralph Beer, who was on the board of the Kansas City Interfaith Council. Dr. Beer was very excited to help, and he shared with me that he often visited Unity Village. He liked the peace of walking through the gardens and the fountains. And he found peace in prayer at Unity Village, as well as in his mosque. He came to visit, and he got so excited as we unrolled this small piece of parchment. It's the Shahada, the prayer that Muslims recite every day. It's the first surah of the Quran. And he talked so passionately and quickly, excitedly about this prayer as we shared. I had another document that had similar writing, and I thought they might be related, but they'd never been fully cataloged. And so I brought it out. And Dr. Mir apologized that he wasn't fluent in Arabic. Dr. Mir is from Kashmir, the disputed area between Pakistan and India. But we made a copy for him to take back to the mosque to translate. So this morning we're talking about Islam, and we're talking about the idea of peace. And this is a concept that, surprisingly for many of us, is rooted in Islam. So today we'll talk about the story of Muhammad, a very basic story. We'll talk about some of the misconceptions of Islam and Muslims, the basic beliefs of moderate and mystical Islam, and the practice of inner peace and applying peace in conflict. So Muhammad had mystical visions, and he heard God. This is the calligraphy. Let's go back and do that affirmation. Can you recite the affirmation with me? I live in the peace of God. I live in the peace of God. So again, Muhammad had mystical visions, and he heard God. This is the calligraphy of his name. At 40, he went on a mountain retreat. In a cave, he heard his first revelation, an otherworldly visitation telling him to recite God's message. And the revelations would continue for the rest of his life. When he shared his message publicly, people were very skeptical, even angry. Muhammad had become a merchant as a young man and worked on trade caravans in and out of Arabia. Even as a young man, he showed leadership by guiding other men on long expeditions. And at the age of 25, an older woman named Khadija asked him to marry her. And she became his first follower. She became the one who encouraged him. And his first converts were mostly the disadvantaged, women and the enslaved. It's important to remember that at this time, Arabia had no central government. Each tribe made its own rules and fought for material wealth. Muhammad lived in a violent time and a violent society. Elites challenged and ridiculed and attacked this small group of Muslims. And because of that growing tension, the Muslims fled to Medina. And I invite you to look into this. It's a complicated and difficult past. There, Muhammad took the role of political and military leader as well as spiritual leader. And Muhammad and his fellow Muslims defended themselves against violent raids. But 8 years later, everything had changed. In a dramatic turn of events, the Muslim marched to Mecca. Muhammad rode a camel into the Kaaba shrine while reciting God's message of harmony. Over time, the Arabians left behind their tribal loyalties and joined Islam. And like others, Muhammad was convinced that all religious people have a responsibility to create a good and just society. We can say that Islam transformed Arabia into a different society through its ritual of prayer. And many would say that Muhammad and Islam continue to shape the world. Islam still offers peace. As human beings, we all need physical well-being, connection, joy, independence, and meaning in our lives. And when those needs are not met, we may experience feelings that leave us exhausted and depressed. Human beings use so many words for feelings that are negative, right? There are more feelings that are negative than there are positive words. Overwhelmed, confused, vulnerable, angry, tired. And radical tactics are often used in response to dramatic changes and the strain of modern life. You know, there are psychologists, social workers, and clergy that share that people convicted of violent crimes have often suffered violence as children. Destructive actions can be misplaced cries for help, a psychological blocking of that deep longing for a common desire for love, for harmony. The desire for peace is truly universal. So I once knew a woman who criticized Islam whenever it was mentioned. She seemed to have bought every single negative stereotype there was. And my uncomfortableness with our conversations was one reason that I participated in a Muslim book discussion group several years ago. With each book, we looked at a different country, a different understanding of Islam, and we confronted our own misunderstandings. In Fatima Manursi's book about her childhood in Morocco, she recalled what the adults in her sphere told her about the Christians during World War II. So this is a misperception. Those Christians lived in the north like all the others in what we call Blad Telj, or the snowland. Allah did not favor the Christians. Their climate was harsh and cold, and that made them moody, and when the sun did not show for months, nasty. To warm themselves up, they had to drink wine and strong beverages, and they got aggressive and started looking for trouble. So you can hear some truths in there, but there's all these misperceptions. And so my point is this: what misperceptions do we hold about Muslims today? We see the veils and the scarves. We may relive the fear of the terrorizing events of September 11th, 2001. Tragedies are sometimes instigated by extremists, people who claim to be following Islam. And those actions are part of our world. But the vast majority of Muslims find those actions repugnant and denials of true peace, true Islam. So today, I want to look to the heart of Islam, to moderate and mystical Islam for wisdom. So what is Islam? Well, you've probably heard about various schools and sects within Islam. The Sunni are traditional and the largest majority of Muslims. The Shia choose additional ritual practices, and the Sufi are mystical. The whirling dervishes who dance are Sufi mystics. Islam is the second largest religion in the world, and in the coming decades, Islam may surpass Christianity in adherence. Each of the 5 pillars in Islam, the declaration of faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage, are all meant to connect one with Allah, living in God's peace. They're all spiritual practices. So what is the purpose of Islam? Well, it can be described as those practices, a series of methods and actions rather than one particular doctrine. It's about a relationship between an individual and Allah. Allah is simply the Arabic word for God. And there's this simplicity to Islam. So what is the role of Islam? Well, prayer is, or rather, what is the role of peace in Islam? Prayer is actually essential to the Muslim faith, and in it, many find peace. We all know that Muslims pray 5 times a day. How many times do you pray a day? So I just invite you to rest in this prayer for a moment. This is the Shahada. I testify that there is no God but God, and I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of God. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, praise be to Allah, Lord of the universe, the compassionate, the merciful, master of the day of judgment. You alone we worship, and you alone we pray for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored, not of those who have incurred your wrath, nor those who have gone astray. So the prayer is the prayer on the parchment at Unity Village. And it's said to address life's challenges. Back up. So what is this second document, this tiny silk booklet? And why was it, along with that parchment, in the Unity archives? When Dr. Mir returned, we actually both had more to share. He brought a translation of this booklet, and he explained that, yes, it was in Arabic. It was a calendar of the holy month of Ramadan. It included prayers, and it was purchased at the Mosque El Azra in Cairo in the early 1900s. It contained also wisdom sayings and even an ad that probably paid for printing the booklet. And I had learned more too. In my research in the archives, I had been able to connect these documents, and I learned that Myrtle Fillmore had received a package from her friend Esther Robinson in 1906. Robertson included the parchment, the silk booklet, and a string of clay beads, all from Egypt. They were sent for the new Unity Library. And Robertson had received them from yet another friend and a neighbor, Florence Groff, a scholar of Egypt who had made frequent trips to the country. Today, all of these items are thoroughly documented and translated by Dr. Mir and Kansas City's Muslim community, and they helped us solve this 108-year-old mystery. So I think that Myrtle Fillmore kept these because of that prayer connection. She understood that these were examples of prayer around the world, and that when she was praying, others were praying as well. So let's go back to that quote. By the way, this is the mosque in Cairo. And this quote from Charles Fillmore. Sometimes I've thought it's silly to pray. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore once shared his own struggle with prayer. I remember a time when I thought it was silly to pray. I said I'd never seen God. Where was he? And what was the use of praying to a God that you don't know anything about? I think that was all right in my understanding, but I got so that I couldn't utter a prayer. I couldn't even make an effort to pray. We do need prayer. We all need prayer. We need this union or this communion with the higher realm of being. There is no other way I know but prayer. So Charles definitely came around to be a prayer warrior, a defender of prayer, a user of prayer. There's no other way to connect the divine but with prayer. Salat, or prayer, is often spoke about in the Holy Quran. And the Quran states, "In the remembrance of God do hearts find peace." In the remembrance of God do hearts find peace. Some Muslims believe that spacing their prayers 5 times a day contributes to their well-being and leaves practically no room for negative thinking. And the advice is actually similar to the statement by the Apostle Paul to pray without ceasing. In prayer, Muslims surrender, relinquish control, and find peace in prayer. And of course, Muslims say formal prayers and spontaneous prayers. Outsiders may see prayer in Islam as those assigned words in community. Even then, it is this attitude of prayer that often leads to a spiritual experience. Pure peace can leave us calm, clear-headed, centered, and content. In peace, we are relaxed, relieved, satisfied, and tranquil. I want to pray deeply and to live from that peace within. We all want to live from a calm, serene place of contentment. Of course, Muslims live and work throughout our world, and I want to share with you a video. This is a brief clip from Dr. Ala Murabit. She applies her faith to her work. She's actually a medical doctor who grew up in Canada. She went to school, to medical school in Libya, and she serves as the United Nations High-Level Commissioner on Health, Employment, and Economic Growth. I don't know that that fits on a business card. She has mediated conflicts around the world, and at the Oslo Freedom Forum, she's speaking about constructive peace and the power of listening.
Now I know a lot of you probably think I'm all unicorns and rainbows. A general once told me I was asking him to hug the guy with the grenade in his hand, and I'm not. That would be silly. The only thing sillier is trying to bomb the grenade out of his hand. It makes a much bigger mess. The only way to get that bomb, that grenade, that gun put down permanently and safely is for us to fill that head and those hands with something else. A pencil, a paycheck, a diploma, a dream. It's the very essence of this forum. And it's something that we all have a hand in. When we go into conflicts, we can say, we need to listen. We need to listen to local communities. We need to listen to women. And we cannot listen if we are too busy bombing them. Thank you.
So I think that we could apply, oh, we're still going, we're stuck. Oh, it moved, thank you. So I think that we could apply what she said to the conflicts in our lives. When do we listen? How do we apply that peace in our own lives? So let's affirm together again. I live in the peace of God. One more time. I live in the peace of God. So let us apply this peace in our world. We may think of prayer as a conversation with God, of changing our thinking patterns through affirmations or sitting quietly in meditation. I encourage you to use written prayers if you choose, or spontaneous prayer. And ask yourself, when do you pray to connect to God? explore for yourself how to access peace and then apply that peace in your lives. Ma salama means peace to you in Arabic. Ma salama. Ma salama.